As I sat beside my daughter's hospital bed, watching her fight for her life after a devastating car accident, my husband of 15 years was boarding a private jet to Bali with his marketing assistant, using the healthcare foundation funds we had established after our son's death 3 years earlier. What he didn't realize was that I was on the hospital's executive board, with access to every financial transaction and security camera in the building. When the truth came crashing down around him 2 weeks later, the look of utter shock on his face made one thing crystal clear. He had severely underestimated who he was dealing with. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The call came at 3:17 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the middle of finalizing our healthcare foundation's annual grant allocations when my phone lit up with the hospital's number. My heart stopped momentarily. The same visceral reaction I'd developed ever since losing our son, Ethan, to a rare form of leukemia 3 years earlier. Now, any call from a hospital sent immediate fear coursing through my veins. Mrs. Richardson? This is Memorial Regional. Your daughter Olivia has been in an accident. The world around me blurred as the nurse continued explaining. Multi-vehicle collision, serious injuries, emergency surgery. Please come immediately. I tried calling my husband, James, 6 times during the 15-minute drive to the hospital. Each call went straight to voicemail. This wasn't entirely unusual. As the CEO of Richardson Medical Technologies, he frequently attended meetings where phones weren't permitted. Still, given the circumstances, I had expected him to respond to at least one of my increasingly desperate messages. The next 48 hours passed in a fog of terror and hope as Olivia underwent 2 surgeries to repair internal bleeding and a shattered femur. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but she remained sedated and critical. I barely left her side, sleeping in the uncomfortable recliner next to her bed, holding her hand, and whispering reassurances I wasn't entirely sure I believed. James finally appeared nearly 12 hours after Olivia's admission. His explanation, about being in a strategic planning retreat that ran late sounding hollow but plausible. He stayed for 3 hours, seeming appropriately concerned yet oddly detached, before explaining he needed to return to the office to handle an unavoidable situation with international investors. I'll be back first thing tomorrow, he promised, kissing my forehead perfunctorily. Try to get some rest. The foundation is covering all expenses. At least we don't have to worry about that. The foundation, the Ethan Richardson Memorial Healthcare Foundation, which we had established after our son's death, dedicated to supporting families facing catastrophic medical situations and funding research into rare pediatric diseases. It had been my lifeline during the darkest period of grief, giving purpose to pain that might otherwise have destroyed me completely. James had initially seemed supportive of the foundation, serving as its treasurer and public face at fundraising events. But his involvement had waned over the past year, as he focused increasingly on expanding his medical technology company into Asian markets. I had shouldered more of the foundation work, grateful for the sense of purpose it provided while our marriage slowly drifted into the polite detachment that follows unprocessed grief. On day 3 of Olivia's hospitalization, Dr. Helena Martinez, chief of pediatric surgery, and my closest friend on the hospital board, stopped by to check on us personally. "How are you holding up, Rebecca?" she asked, her eyes reflecting genuine concern as she reviewed Olivia's charts. "1 minute at a time," I replied honestly. "James has been tied up with work, so it's mainly been just me." Something flickered across Helena's face, a moment of hesitation that immediately triggered my attention. "What is it?" I asked. "Nothing," she said too quickly. "I'm sure he's overwhelmed with everything happening at once." Before I could press further, Olivia's monitors began signaling a spike in her heart rate, and Helena's attention immediately shifted to my daughter's medical needs. By the time she stabilized Olivia, the moment had passed, and Helena was called to another emergency. That evening, while Olivia slept, I tried calling James again. No answer. His executive assistant informed me he was unavailable for the next several days due to emergency meetings regarding their Asian expansion. When I mentioned our daughter's condition, her response seemed genuinely confused. I thought Ms. Richardson was recovering well. That's what Caroline told the office yesterday. Caroline was James's marketing director, a talented young professional he had hired 18 months earlier. I had met her briefly at company functions, striking, confident, ambitious. Who told you Olivia was recovering well? I asked, something cold settling in my stomach. Caroline mentioned it when she and Mr. Richardson left for their business trip yesterday morning. She said you had things under control at the hospital. The pieces began aligning with sickening clarity. James hadn't been at emergency business meetings. He had apparently left the country with his marketing director while our daughter fought for her life. And somehow, they had discussed Olivia's condition. Information Caroline could only have gotten from James. I thanked the assistant calmly and ended the call, my mind racing with questions and suspicions. Checking James's location on our shared family account showed his phone was turned off or unreachable. His credit cards, however, told a different story. Our joint account showed recent charges at Jakarta International Airport and an exclusive resort in Bali, definitely not the location of Richardson Medical's Asian headquarters in Singapore. Still, business travel to Indonesia wasn't entirely implausible. Perhaps Caroline had accompanied him as part of the marketing team. Perhaps I was overreacting due to stress and exhaustion. Perhaps. My rationalizations were interrupted by a gentle knock on the door. Michael Dawson, the hospital's financial director and another member of the board I served on, entered with an uncomfortable expression. "Rebecca, I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's a financial matter I need to discuss." He glanced at Olivia, lowering his voice. "Perhaps we could step into the hall." In the corridor, Michael's professional demeanor gave way to evident discomfort. "There's been an unusual transaction from the Ethan Richardson Foundation account that requires your authorization. Since you're a signatory on the account, I wanted to bring it to your attention immediately." He handed me his tablet, displaying a transfer of $75,000 to a private aviation company dated the previous day, followed by another $120,000 transfer to something called Bali Paradise Exclusive Experiences. These were authorized using James's credentials, Michael explained, but they fall outside the Foundation's approved expenditure categories. Given the substantial amounts, our compliance team flagged them for review. I stared at the screen, the final piece of the puzzle falling into place with devastating clarity. James wasn't just traveling with his marketing director. He was vacationing luxuriously with her, using funds from our dead son's memorial foundation, while our daughter lay critically injured in the hospital. These are definitely not authorized Foundation expenditures, I confirmed, my voice steadier than I felt. These appear to be personal expenses that have been inappropriately charged to the Foundation. Michael nodded grimly. "That's what we suspected. I'll initiate the standard procedures for unauthorized use of Foundation funds. As a board member, you should know this will trigger an automatic investigation and notification to all board members." "I understand," I replied, a strange calm settling over me. "Please proceed according to protocol, no exceptions." After Michael left, I returned to Olivia's bedside, my mind processing this betrayal with clinical precision. The Foundation funds were held in sacred trust, money donated to honor Ethan's memory and help other families facing medical crises. Using those funds for a romantic getaway wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage or abandonment of our injured daughter. It was a desecration of our son's legacy. As I sat watching Olivia's chest rise and fall with each assisted breath, something crystallized within me. The shock and hurt remained, but above them rose a cold, clear determination. James had underestimated me severely, not just as a wife, but as a businesswoman, board member, and mother. He seemed to have forgotten that before becoming the supportive spouse behind his rise in the medical technology industry, I had been a corporate attorney specializing in financial malfeasance. He had apparently overlooked that I sat on the hospital's executive board with access to every financial system his foundation transactions touched. Most critically, he had misjudged the lengths to which I would go to protect what remained of my family and my son's legacy. I gently squeezed Olivia's hand, making her a silent promise. When this was over, her father would learn what happened when someone betrayed everything I held sacred. But first, I needed to gather every piece of evidence, build an airtight case, and ensure Olivia had everything she needed for a complete recovery. I pulled out my phone and made 2 calls. The first to Helena Martinez, asking for a private meeting of the hospital board's executive committee. The second to my former law partner, Rachel Goldman, who had continued practicing while I stepped back to focus on the foundation. "Rachel," I said when she answered, "I need you to help me protect my children's legacy. How quickly can you get to Memorial Regional?" As I ended the call, a notification appeared on my phone. James had used the foundation credit card again, this time at a jewelry store in Bali's most exclusive shopping district. He had no idea that every transaction was being automatically forwarded to my email, creating a documented trail of his betrayal. The calm that settled over me wasn't resignation, but resolution. James had no idea who he was dealing with, but he was about to find out. Where are you watching from today? Share your location in the comments, and if this story of betrayal and determination resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed. Tomorrow, I'll reveal what happened when I decided to stop being a victim and started using my position on the hospital board to uncover the full extent of my husband's deception. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The morning after discovering James's betrayal, I awoke in the hospital recliner with a clarity I hadn't felt since before Ethan's illness. For 3 years, grief had clouded my judgment, allowing James to gradually take control of our finances, the foundation, and most of our major decisions. I had retreated into the foundation work and mothering Olivia, finding purpose in caring for others, while neglecting to notice what was happening within my own marriage. That fog had now lifted completely. As I watched the sunrise through Olivia's hospital window, I mentally outlined the steps necessary to protect my daughter, secure the foundation, and hold James accountable for his actions. Rachel arrived at 7:30 a.m., her professional demeanor firmly in place despite the early hour and personal nature of my call. We'd been law school roommates before becoming partners at Goldman and Richardson Family Law, the practice I had stepped away from after Ethan's diagnosis. She embraced me briefly before pulling out her laptop and legal pad. "Start from the beginning," she instructed, her voice gentle but focused. "I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." For the next hour, as nurses periodically checked on Olivia, I detailed everything: the foundation structure, James's position as treasurer, the unauthorized transfers, his absence during Olivia's crisis, and the evidence suggesting an affair with Caroline. Rachel documented everything methodically, occasionally asking clarifying questions or suggesting additional information we should gather. When I finished, she reviewed her notes before meeting my eyes directly. "This is straightforward misappropriation of foundation funds," she concluded. "The personal use of charitable donations constitutes fraud, possibly tax evasion depending on how it was reported, and breach of fiduciary duty at minimum. That's before we even address the ethical violations related to the hospital board." "What do you recommend?" I asked, watching Olivia's monitors maintain their steady rhythm. "First, we secure the foundation's remaining assets immediately," Rachel replied. "As a co-founder and board member, you have authority to freeze the accounts pending investigation. Second, we need comprehensive financial forensics, not just recent transactions but the past 3 years. I suspect the Bali trip isn't his first misuse of funds." "And the hospital board?" I asked, thinking of my 2 p.m. meeting with the executive committee. Be transparent but strategic, Rachel advised. Disclose the unauthorized transactions, but frame it as a governance issue you've discovered and are addressing. Position yourself as taking responsible action rather than as a victim of circumstances. She paused, her expression softening slightly. Rebecca, are you certain you want to pursue this? There are less public ways to handle marital betrayal. I appreciated her concern, but my resolve had only strengthened overnight. This isn't about a marriage falling apart, Rachel. He's desecrating Ethan's memory, using money meant to help children like our son while our daughter lies here injured. There's no private resolution for that kind of betrayal. Rachel nodded, recognizing the determination in my voice. Then let's make sure we're thorough. I'll contact Judge Winters for emergency authorization to freeze the foundation accounts and begin financial discovery. Judge Miriam Winters had handled Ethan's medical guardianship during his treatment and had helped expedite the foundation's establishment after his death. She understood the foundation's significance and would recognize the urgency of protecting its assets. After Rachel left to file the necessary paperwork, I called Janet Simmons, the foundation's dedicated accountant. Janet had been with us from the beginning, a meticulous professional who had lost her own daughter to childhood cancer decades earlier. Her commitment to the foundation's mission was personal and absolute. I need complete financial records for the past 3 years, I explained after briefly outlining the situation. Every transaction, authorization, transfer, everything. Janet's response confirmed my growing suspicions. I've been trying to reach you about some concerns for months, Rebecca. There are patterns in the financial activities that troubled me, but James assured me they were approved expenditures for foundation business development. My stomach tightened. What kind of patterns? Regular transfers to various consultants and service providers without detailed invoices or deliverables. Unusual travel expenses categorized as donor development, but without corresponding donor meetings in the follow-up reports. Several high-end technology purchases that never appeared in the foundation's inventory. Each word felt like another betrayal. I had been so consumed by grief and then by the meaningful work of helping other families that I had completely abdicated financial oversight to James, trusting him to honor our son's memory with the same reverence I did. Send everything directly. To Rachel, I instructed. And Janet, I'm sorry I wasn't more attentive to your concerns. You were healing, Janet replied gently. He took advantage of that. It's not your failure. It's his betrayal. By early afternoon, preliminary reports from both Rachel and Janet painted a disturbing picture. Over the past 18 months, James had gradually diverted nearly $750,000 from the foundation through a sophisticated system of falsified expenses, fictional consultants, and inflated reimbursements. The patterns suggested both personal use and potential funneling of funds into his business ventures. The Bali vacation represented not an anomaly, but an escalation, perhaps growing confidence that his schemes would remain undetected. The timing, coinciding with Olivia's accident, demonstrated a callousness that still shocked me despite everything else I had discovered. At 2 p.m. sharp, I entered the hospital board's executive meeting room. 6 colleagues awaited me, each selected for their discretion and expertise. Helena Martinez, who had become my closest friend during Ethan's treatment. Michael Dawson, whose financial vigilance had first alerted me to the unauthorized transfers. Judge Miriam Winters, who had arranged to attend as both a legal authority and longtime foundation supporter. Dr. Samuel Chen, the hospital's ethics officer. Catherine Okafor, head of hospital security. And finally, William Torres, the board chair and retired FBI financial crimes specialist. Their expressions ranged from sympathy to carefully controlled anger as I detailed what we had uncovered. I presented the information not as a devastated wife, but as a foundation executive addressing a serious governance breach. keeping my emotions firmly in check while outlining the evidence assembled in less than 24 hours. When I finished, William was the first to speak. This requires immediate and comprehensive action. Beyond the Foundation concerns, there are potential implications for the hospital itself, given our partnership with the Foundation and Richardson Medical Technologies. I've already initiated emergency measures to secure the Foundation's remaining assets, I explained. Judge Winters has granted temporary injunctions freezing the accounts pending full investigation. Miriam nodded confirmation. The evidence presented clearly justified immediate intervention to prevent further misappropriation. The hospital needs to evaluate its exposure, Michael added. Richardson Medical Technologies supplies critical equipment to several departments. We need contingency plans if this situation impacts those relationships. Helena, always focused on patient care implications, leaned forward. My primary concern is ensuring this doesn't affect the families currently receiving Foundation support. There are 17 children whose treatments are partially funded through Foundation grants. I've already addressed that, I assured her. The Foundation's Direct Patient Support Fund is separately managed and unaffected. No family will see their support interrupted. As the meeting continued, each board member offered expertise and resources to address different aspects of the situation. Catherine would review security footage to document James's hospital access patterns during Olivia's hospitalization. Samuel would evaluate ethical compliance issues related to Foundation grants. Michael would conduct a complete audit of all financial relationships between the hospital, the Foundation, and Richardson Medical. Throughout the meeting, I felt a strange sense of homecoming. This was the world I had inhabited before grief had dulled my professional instincts. A world of strategic thinking, careful analysis, and collaborative problem-solving. The skills I had developed over years of legal practice hadn't disappeared. They had merely been dormant, waiting for purpose to reawaken them. As the meeting concluded, William pulled me aside. Rebecca, I need to ask, are you prepared for how James might respond when he discovers what you've initiated? Men like him rarely surrender power without a fight. I appreciated his concern, but months of watching Ethan battle an implacable disease had redefined my understanding of difficult fights. I spent 2 years watching my son face death with more courage than most adults will ever need to summon. After that, confronting my husband's betrayal feels straightforward by comparison. William nodded, respecting my resolve. The board stands with you, not just professionally, but personally. What he's done violated everything this hospital and your Foundation represent. Returning to Olivia's room, I found her awake for the first time since her second surgery, groggy and confused, but conscious. The sight of her eyes focusing on mine pushed everything else temporarily aside. I held her hand as the doctor explained her condition and progress, translating medical terminology into reassurances a frightened 16-year-old could understand. "Where's Dad?" she asked eventually, her voice raspy from the intubation tube recently removed. I had prepared for this question, but still found myself momentarily speechless. How do you tell your injured child that her father has abandoned her for a tropical vacation with his mistress? "He's traveling for work," I said finally, choosing words that were technically true while postponing more difficult truths for when she was stronger. "But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." As Olivia drifted back to sleep, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Financial forensics completed first-level review. Evidence suggests Caroline has been receiving Foundation funds as a special lie consultant for over a year. Monthly payments of $12,000 categorized as public relations services, with no deliverables documented. Also found evidence of a separate apartment in Westside Towers leased using Foundation subsidiary since last February. The apartment explained so much: James's late nights, weekend strategy sessions, his growing emotional distance. The relationship with Caroline clearly predated what I had imagined. This wasn't just a recent affair, but a parallel life he had been constructing for months, funded by our son's memorial foundation. Another text followed. Judge Winters has approved comprehensive asset freeze and expedited discovery. All foundation accounts secured. James's personal accounts linked to foundation requiring court approval for any withdrawals over $500. The financial vice was tightening. James and Caroline were likely still enjoying their Bali getaway, blissfully unaware that their access to the funds financing their lifestyle had been completely severed. Soon they would attempt a charge or withdrawal, and discover the first indication that their carefully constructed fiction was unraveling. I settled back into the chair beside Olivia's bed, a strange calm settling over me. For the first time since Ethan's diagnosis 4 years earlier, I felt fully present and in control of what came next. James had underestimated me profoundly, mistaking grief-induced withdrawal for permanent surrender of my capabilities. What he failed to understand was that motherhood had made me more formidable, not less. Watching Ethan fight had taught me unimaginable endurance. Building the foundation had honed my strategic thinking. And now, protecting Olivia and our sons, legacy had reawakened the professional skills I had temporarily set aside. James would soon discover he wasn't facing the grieving, distracted woman he had taken advantage of. He was facing the mother, lawyer, and board member who had found her power again, and was prepared to use it. If this part of the journey speaks to you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Sometimes our greatest strength emerges precisely when others believe we are at our weakest. Subscribe to hear what happened when James returned from Bali to discover his world had completely changed in his absence. By the 5th day of Olivia's hospitalization, her condition had stabilized enough for the doctors to move her out of intensive care. The relief I felt watching her improve was immeasurable, though tempered by the knowledge that her recovery would be lengthy. Multiple fractures and internal injuries meant months of physical therapy ahead, but the critical danger had passed. She was sleeping more naturally now, her body beginning the hard work of healing itself. As Olivia rested, I transformed her hospital room into a command center of sorts. 2 laptops occupied the small table by the window, one for foundation, business, the other dedicated to the growing legal case. A carefully maintained folder contained every document, transaction record, and piece of evidence Rachel and I had assembled. My phone constantly buzzed with updates from the investigative team we had assembled. The hospital administration had been remarkably accommodating, understanding that I couldn't leave Olivia alone while simultaneously needing to address the foundation crisis. They provided access to a private conference room when I needed to conduct sensitive meetings and ensured Olivia received the highest standard of care. The solidarity shown by my colleagues on the board had transformed a potentially isolating experience into one where I felt powerfully supported. That afternoon, as I reviewed the latest financial forensics report, my phone displayed James's number for the first time in nearly a week. I felt a strange detachment as I answered, putting the call on speaker so Rachel, who had just arrived, with lunch, could hear. "Rebecca," James began, his voice carrying that particular tone of controlled frustration I recognized from difficult business negotiations. "There seems to be some problem with the accounts. None of the cards are working." "Where are you, James?" I asked calmly, making notes as he spoke. "Singapore," he replied without hesitation. "The Asian expansion meetings, like I told you. But something's wrong with all our accounts. Even my personal cards are being declined. Has there been some kind of fraud alert?" The lie came so easily to him. Singapore instead of Bali. Business instead of pleasure. His concern focused entirely on the financial inconvenience rather than inquiring about his critically injured daughter. "There's definitely been fraud identified," I replied evenly. "Quite extensive fraud, actually. The foundation accounts have been frozen pending investigation, as have any personal accounts linked to foundation funds. A moment of silence followed. I could almost see him calculating, adjusting his approach. "What are you talking about? What investigation?" "The one launched after you transferred foundation funds to pay for private jets and luxury accommodations in Bali," I explained, my voice remaining professional. "The hospital board flagged the unusual transactions. Judge Winters approved the emergency asset freeze yesterday." Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted to something softer, conciliatory. "Rebecca, there's clearly been a misunderstanding. Yes, I'm in Bali, not Singapore. I should have been honest about that. I needed some time to clear my head after everything we've been through with Ethan. Caroline accompanied me as my assistant to help manage some foundation outreach while I took a few days to recover. The foundation funds were used because this is partially a business development trip." Rachel raised an eyebrow at the audacity of his explanation. I continued making notes, documenting every aspect of his story. "That's interesting, James," I replied. "Especially since Caroline has apparently been a special consultant to the foundation, receiving $12,000 monthly payments for over a year. And the foundation has been covering the rent on an apartment at Westside Towers since February. Were those also business development expenses?" The silence stretched so long I momentarily wondered if the call had disconnected. Finally, his voice returned with an edge of cold anger. "You've clearly made assumptions without understanding the full picture. We should discuss this in person when I return next week." "That timeline won't work," I informed him. "The forensic accounting team has already identified approximately $750,000 in questionable transactions over the past 18 months. The board has requested your immediate return to address these discrepancies. Your access to all foundation assets and accounts will remain suspended until this matter is resolved." "You can't do that," he said, the controlled facade cracking. "I'm the treasurer. Those accounts require my authorization." "Not anymore," I stated simply. "Judge Winters approved emergency restructuring of authorization protocols given the evidence of misappropriation. The foundation is currently under independent financial management pending resolution of these issues." I could hear muffled conversation on his end, James apparently covering the phone to consult with Caroline. When he returned, his approach had shifted again. "Rebecca, I understand you're upset about Olivia's accident and me being away. That's fair. But involving the board and freezing accounts is an extreme overreaction that harms the foundation and our family. Let me book a flight home, and we can work through this privately." "This isn't about me being upset, James," I corrected him. "This is about fiduciary responsibility and potentially criminal misuse of charitable funds. And speaking of Olivia, she's been moved from intensive care. Her doctors are cautiously optimistic about her recovery, not that you've asked." Another pause. "Of course I'm concerned about Olivia. I've been getting updates from Dr. Wilson." This was another lie. Dr. Wilson had confirmed he'd had no contact with James since Olivia's admission. I chose not to challenge it directly, instead staying focused on the immediate issues. "Your return flight has already been arranged," I informed him. "The foundation board has authorized emergency travel expenses for you to return tomorrow. You'll find the itinerary in your email. The board expects you at Memorial Regional for an emergency session at 2 p.m. the day after tomorrow." "This is ridiculous," James snapped, abandoning the conciliatory approach. "You're turning a simple misunderstanding into a public spectacle. If you want to discuss our marriage or my relationship with Caroline, fine. But dragging the foundation and hospital board into it is completely inappropriate. This isn't about our marriage," I stated clearly. "This is about the foundation established in our son's name and your fiduciary responsibilities as its treasurer. The board meeting will proceed as scheduled, with or without your presence. Though, I should mention that failure to appear could complicate matters significantly from a legal perspective." After the call ended, Rachel looked at me with a mixture of professional respect and personal concern. You handled that perfectly. Not emotional, not accusatory, just factual and focused on the governance issues rather than the personal betrayal. He's still underestimating me, I observed, reviewing my notes from the conversation. He thinks this is an emotional reaction he can manage with the right combination of lies and manipulation. He doesn't understand that this is already beyond his control. Men like James rarely recognize the consequences of their actions until they're inescapable, Rachel noted. His primary concern on that call was his immediate financial inconvenience, not the foundation's integrity or even his daughter's condition. She was right. Throughout our conversation, James had displayed no remorse for misusing Ethan's memorial funds, no genuine concern for Olivia, and no recognition of the seriousness of his situation. His only goal had been regaining control of the narrative, the foundation assets, and me. That evening, Helena stopped by to check on Olivia and update me on the hospital's internal review. We've completed a comprehensive audit of all interactions between the hospital and Richardson Medical Technologies, she explained. There are some concerning patterns regarding equipment pricing and maintenance contracts that may constitute additional conflicts of interest. This was a new dimension I hadn't yet considered. The possibility that James had used his position with the foundation to benefit his company in dealings with the hospital. The potential ethical violations extended beyond the foundation misappropriation. The Board Ethics Committee has recommended suspending all new contracts with Richardson Medical pending resolution of these concerns, Helena continued. Existing equipment will remain in service with independent maintenance provisions to ensure patient care isn't affected. This would hit James where it truly mattered, his company's reputation and contracts. Richardson Medical Technologies had built its growth largely on hospital partnerships, with Memorial Regional serving as its flagship reference client. Suspension of this relationship would raise immediate questions throughout the medical community. Thank you for handling this so carefully, I told Helena, genuinely grateful for her thoughtful approach to a complex situation. You would do the same for any of us, she replied simply. The board stands united on this. What James has done violates everything we believe in professionally and personally. Later that night, as Olivia slept peacefully after her best day since the accident, I received a message from Catherine Okafor, the security director. Surveillance confirms JR visited hospital only once during O's first 5 days. During 3-hour visit, spent 47 minutes on phone in hallway, 36 minutes in cafeteria, remainder in room. Security footage from Foundation office shows CM accessed files at 10:43 p.m. night before Bali departure. Removing documents from secure cabinet. Footage secured. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Caroline hadn't just been James's mistress. She had been actively participating in accessing Foundation documents before their trip. This suggested a level of premeditation and complicity beyond what I had initially suspected. I forwarded the information to Rachel, who responded immediately. This strengthens potential conspiracy charges. Will incorporate into filing. Judge Winters has approved emergency hearing for tomorrow regarding Foundation governance restructuring. Everything was proceeding according to the strategy we had carefully developed. The legal framework was being established. The evidence was accumulating. The institutional responses were aligned. While James was scrambling to book return flights from a luxury vacation suddenly turned disastrous, we had constructed a comprehensive approach addressing every aspect of his misconduct. As I sat beside Olivia's bed, I reflected on how dramatically my perspective had shifted in just 1 week. The devastation of discovering James's betrayal had transformed into a calm, focused determination to protect what mattered most, my children's legacy and future. The grief that had clouded my judgment for years had finally lifted, revealing not just the extent of James's betrayal, but also the strength I had never truly lost. I gently adjusted Olivia's blanket as she stirred slightly in her sleep. "We're going to be okay," I whispered, as much to myself as to her. More than okay. For the first time since Ethan's diagnosis 4 years earlier, I fully believed those words. Whatever challenges lay ahead, James's return, the board meeting, the legal proceedings, Olivia's recovery, I was prepared to face them with clarity and purpose. James had mistaken my grief for weakness, my focus on healing for inattention, my trust for blindness. In exploiting what he perceived as vulnerability, he had inadvertently awakened capabilities within me that had merely been dormant, not destroyed. He was about to discover the fundamental miscalculation at the center of his betrayal. Underestimating a mother protecting her children's legacy was the worst mistake he could have made. Has someone underestimated your resilience during a challenging time? Share your experience in the comments below. And subscribe to hear what happened when James faced the hospital board, and me, after his return from Bali forced him to confront the consequences of his actions. The morning of the board meeting arrived with a clarity that seemed almost symbolic. Bright sunlight streaming through Olivia's hospital room window after days of overcast skies. My daughter had continued to improve, now able to sit up and engage in longer conversations. Her doctors were increasingly confident about her prognosis, though the road to full recovery remained long. "You look different today," Olivia observed as I organized my documents for the afternoon meeting. "More like your lawyer self from before Ethan got sick." Her perception startled me. I hadn't realized how visible my transformation had been, even to my teenage daughter navigating her own recovery. "Do I?" I asked, pausing to sit beside her. She nodded. "It's your focused face. You used to have it all the time when you'd prepare for big cases. Then after Ethan, it disappeared for a while." She hesitated before adding, "I like seeing it again." I squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you for noticing. I think that part of me is finally finding its way back." "Is Dad in trouble?" she asked directly. "I know something's happening. The nurses get quiet whenever he's mentioned, and you've been having all these meetings with Rachel." I had been selectively honest with Olivia about the situation, sharing that there were serious concerns about foundation finances, but sparing her the details of her father's personal betrayal while she was still healing. Now, facing her direct question, I needed to find the right balance between truth and protection. "Yes, he's in trouble," I confirmed. "There are significant issues with how foundation funds have been used. The board meeting today will address those concerns." She absorbed this quietly before asking, "Is that why he's barely been here? Because he knows he's in trouble?" "Partly," I acknowledged. "The situation is complicated and we'll need to have a more detailed conversation when you're further along in your recovery. What's important for you to know now is that none of this is your concern or responsibility. Your job is focusing on healing." Olivia studied my face with an insight. That reminded me painfully of Ethan. "You're protecting me from something bigger, aren't you?" Rather than denying it, I nodded. "Some conversations should wait until you're stronger, but I promise you'll know everything when the time is right." She seemed satisfied with this answer, and our conversation shifted to her physical therapy schedule for the afternoon. As I gathered my materials to leave, she called after me. "Mom, whatever Dad did, it's not your fault. You trusted him because that's what good people do. They trust." Her words struck me profoundly. In the whirlwind of discovery and response, I had barely examined my own feelings of responsibility, the nagging question of how I could have missed the warning signs for so long. Hearing my daughter absolve me of guilt I hadn't even fully acknowledged brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "When did you get so wise?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Probably around the time I got hit by a truck," she replied with gallows humor that was so reminiscent of Ethan that both of us laughed despite ourselves. I left her room with renewed purpose, stopping briefly to confer with her medical team. About the afternoon schedule before meeting Rachel in the hospital's administrative wing. She was reviewing our presentation materials one final time, meticulous as always. James arrived back in the country last night, she informed me. His lawyer contacted me this morning requesting a delay of today's meeting. I declined, citing the emergency nature of the Foundation governance issues. Who's representing him? I asked, curious about who James would turn to in this situation. Daniel Hargrove, Rachel replied with a slight grimace. Hargrove had a reputation for aggressive defense of high-profile clients, often employing media, manipulation, and intimidation tactics. Not surprising, but it confirms he's taking this seriously. Good, I noted. That means he's finally grasping the severity of the situation. At 1:45 p.m., we made our way to the hospital boardroom, where exceptional security measures had been implemented. Catherine had established a carefully controlled environment. All electronic devices would be surrendered at the door, specific seating arrangements had been determined, and hospital security personnel were positioned discreetly nearby. The executive committee members arrived first, each stopping to offer support before taking their assigned seats. Then came the Foundation's independent auditor, Janet Simmons, carrying multiple binders of financial documentation. At precisely 2 p.m., the doors opened to admit James and his attorney. The physical transformation in my husband was striking. The confident executive who had left for Bali had been replaced by someone visibly strained, his usual impeccable appearance diminished by travel fatigue and evident stress. He avoided direct eye contact as he entered, scanning the room to assess who was present and likely calculating potential allies. Finding none, his expression tightened further. William Torres opened the meeting with formal gravity. This emergency session of the Memorial Regional Hospital Executive Board, in conjunction with the Ethan Richardson Memorial Foundation Governance Committee, is now in session. For the record, all parties have been advised this proceeding is being transcribed, with copies to be provided to all relevant authorities. The mention of authorities caused James to shift uncomfortably, while his attorney immediately leaned forward. Before we proceed, Hargrove interjected, my client reserves all rights regarding these proceedings and disputes the emergency nature of this meeting. Mr. Richardson has not been provided adequate time to prepare or review the allegations against him. Noted, William replied without emotion. However, the emergency nature of this session relates directly to ongoing financial operations of both the Foundation and hospital programs dependent on Foundation support. 17 families currently receive critical medical assistance that requires immediate governance resolution to continue uninterrupted. This immediate refocusing on the patients affected, the real victims of James's actions, set the tone for the entire proceeding. This wasn't about a marital dispute or even simply financial misconduct. It was about protecting vulnerable families and honoring commitments made in Ethan's name. For the next hour, Janet Simmons presented the forensic accounting findings with methodical precision. Transaction by transaction, she traced the movement of funds from Foundation accounts to personal uses, highlighting the elaborate categorization schemes used to disguise their true purpose. The evidence was presented not with accusatory language, but with clinical detachment, allowing the facts to speak for themselves. Throughout Janet's presentation, James remained outwardly composed, though I noticed the subtle indicators of his mounting tension, the tightening of his jaw, the whitening of his knuckles as he gripped his pen, the slight perspiration appearing at his temples. Hargrove occasionally scribbled notes or whispered to his client, but offered no substantive interruptions, likely recognizing the futility of disputing such meticulously documented evidence. When Janet concluded, Rachel presented the legal framework of the situation, outlining potential violations of charitable organization regulations, tax laws, and fiduciary responsibilities. She explained the temporary governance measures already implemented under Judge Winter's authority and the protective actions taken to secure remaining Foundation assets. At this juncture, she concluded. The Foundation's board of directors has three primary options: pursue criminal charges based on the evidence presented, seek civil remedies to recover misappropriated funds, or establish a structured restitution agreement with Mr. Richardson that would allow for full repayment while potentially avoiding criminal prosecution. It was the first indication that a path existed that might not result in criminal charges, a small opening that caused James to look up sharply, hope briefly visible in his expression. William then turned to me. Mrs. Richardson, as co-founder of the Foundation and the board member who identified these irregularities, would you like to address the committee? I had carefully prepared for this moment, crafting a statement that prioritized the Foundation's mission rather than my personal feelings. Rising from my seat, I addressed not James, but the entire room. The Ethan Richardson Memorial Foundation was established with a singular purpose: to honor our son's memory by supporting families facing the same devastating challenges we experienced during his illness. Every donation, every pledge, every volunteer hour has been given in service to that mission, to ensure no family faces the impossible choice between their child's medical care and financial survival. I paused, allowing the Foundation's core purpose to resonate before continuing. The misappropriation of Foundation funds represents more than financial misconduct. It betrays the trust of donors who gave in Ethan's name. It endangers the support promised to 17 families currently receiving Foundation assistance. Most fundamentally, it desecrates the memory of a child whose courage in facing illness inspired the creation of this organization. Only then did I briefly look toward James, who had lowered his gaze to the table. As a mother, a board member, and a legal professional, I cannot and will not prioritize personal considerations above my responsibility to protect this Foundation's integrity and mission. However, I recognize that protracted legal proceedings could further harm the Foundation's ability to serve families in need. For that reason alone, I support exploring restitution options that would ensure full recovery of misappropriated funds and immediate restructuring of governance, provided such arrangements include comprehensive accountability and permanent removal of Mr. Richardson from all Foundation responsibilities. The statement struck the perfect balance, principled yet practical, focused on the Foundation's mission rather than personal vendetta, offering a path forward that prioritized recovery of funds for their intended purpose while making clear that James's involvement with the Foundation was irreversibly terminated. Following my statement, Dr. Samuel Chen presented the Ethics Committee's findings regarding conflicts of interest between the Foundation, the hospital, and Richardson Medical Technologies. He detailed concerning patterns in contract awards, pricing, structures, and maintenance agreements that had potentially cost the hospital millions while benefiting James's company. Throughout these presentations, James remained silent, his attorney occasionally noting objections for the record, but offering no substantive defense of the evidence presented. The weight of documentation from multiple independent sources had rendered traditional denial strategies ineffective. When the formal presentations concluded, William turned to James. Mr. Richardson, you've heard the evidence and concerns presented. The board extends an opportunity for you to respond before we move to deliberation on next steps. After a hushed consultation with his attorney, James straightened in his chair. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its usual confident authority. I acknowledge there have been serious lapses in judgment regarding Foundation fund management. While certain expenses were related to legitimate Foundation business development, I recognize that others crossed appropriate boundaries. He paused, seeming to carefully select his next words. I am prepared to make full financial restitution and accept removal from Foundation operations. I also understand the concerns regarding Richardson Medical's hospital contracts, and am willing to address those relationships separately. It was as close to an admission as his legal situation would allow, carefully avoiding specific acknowledgement of wrongdoing while conceding the need for restitution and removal. The calculated response made no mention of Ethan, the foundation's mission, or the families affected by his actions. William nodded without expression. The committee will take your statement into consideration. Please wait outside while we deliberate. As James and his attorney exited, an almost palpable shift occurred in the room, the tension easing slightly as focus turned from evidence presentation to solution determination. The committee's deliberation was remarkably unified, with consensus quickly forming around several core requirements: full financial restitution of all misappropriated funds, plus interest; immediate and permanent removal of James from all foundation roles; restructured governance with enhanced oversight; and a comprehensive review of all Richardson medical contracts with potential rebidding of arrangements found to be improperly influenced. The question of criminal referral remained the only significant point of discussion, with valid perspectives offered on both sides. Ultimately, the committee determined that the decision would depend on James's acceptance of and compliance with all other requirements: immediate criminal referral if he rejected the proposed terms, potential deferral if he fully cooperated with restitution and restructuring. When James returned to receive the committee's decision, the terms were presented not as negotiation points, but as non-negotiable requirements. His expression revealed his recognition that he faced no viable alternatives. Either accept these terms or face immediate criminal charges with the overwhelming evidence already assembled. "I accept these terms," he stated after reviewing the document, his voice barely audible. As the meeting concluded and participants began dispersing, James approached me directly for the first time. Hargrove attempted to intervene, but James waved him off. "Rebecca," he began, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "I know an apology is inadequate, but for whatever it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for the foundation issues, but for everything else too." I studied him carefully, searching for any trace of the man I had once believed him to be. The father who had held my hand through endless hospital nights during Ethan's illness, the partner who had supported my legal career, the husband who had promised to honor our son's memory alongside me. Whatever authentic connection had once existed between us had been systematically destroyed by his choices. "You're right," I replied evenly. "It is inadequate. But the foundation families won't suffer because of your actions, and that's what matters now." Without waiting for his response, I gathered my materials and left the room, feeling a complex mixture of emotions: relief that the foundation would be protected, satisfaction that James would face appropriate consequences, and a profound sense of having reclaimed not just financial resources but my own power and purpose. As I walked back toward Olivia's room, Rachel fell into step beside me. "You know, this is just the beginning, right? There's still the personal side to address: divorce proceedings, personal asset division, Olivia's care arrangements." "I know," I acknowledged. "But we've secured what matters most: the foundation's mission and Ethan's legacy. Everything else is just logistics now." She smiled slightly. "It's good to have the old Rebecca back." "Not the old Rebecca," I corrected her. "Someone new, forged through everything that's happened, stronger for having been broken and rebuilt. Have you ever discovered strength you didn't know you possessed in the midst of betrayal or crisis? Share your experience in the comments. And subscribe to learn how Olivia and I rebuilt our lives after James's betrayal, creating something more meaningful than we could have imagined before this crisis forced us to discover our true resilience. In the days following the board meeting, I watched as the carefully constructed framework of consequences we had established began to reshape reality around us. The foundation underwent a governance transformation, with a new board of directors selected for their commitment to transparency and ethical management. James's restitution payments began flowing into a specially created recovery account, overseen by court-appointed trustees. Richardson Medical Technologies announced a strategic restructuring that industry insiders recognized as damage control, an attempt to distance the company from its founders' mounting legal troubles. Throughout all of this, I remained steadfastly focused on what truly mattered: Olivia's recovery and the Foundation's mission. Everything else, the divorce proceedings initiated by Rachel, the media inquiries politely declined, the hospital, colleagues offering quiet support, remained secondary to these twin priorities. 2 weeks after the board meeting, Olivia was discharged from Memorial Regional with a comprehensive recovery plan. Returning home proved unexpectedly emotional for both of us. The house contained too many complicated memories, happy ones from before Ethan's illness, painful ones from the years of his treatment and after his loss, and now tainted ones knowing James had used this same space to coordinate his betrayal. It doesn't feel right anymore, does it? Olivia observed as we sat in the kitchen that first evening home, the silence of the large house seeming to amplify our discomfort. No, I agreed, appreciating her perceptiveness. It doesn't. Could we move? She asked directly. Start somewhere. New? The question surprised me, though it shouldn't have. Olivia had always possessed an intuitive understanding of emotional landscapes, recognizing when environments had become unhealthy long before adults acknowledged the same truth. It was one of the many ways she resembled Ethan, who had once asked to change hospital rooms because the walls remember too much sadness. Would you want that? I asked, realizing I needed to consider her wishes rather than simply making decisions, for us both. I think so, she replied, her expression thoughtful. This house was built around 4 people. Now it's just us 2. And everything here reminds me of before Ethan got sick, before Dad changed, before my accident. Maybe we need a place that's about now instead of then. Her wisdom struck me deeply. While I had been focusing on practical matters, legal, proceedings, foundation restructuring, medical recovery, Olivia had identified the emotional heart of our situation. We were trying to heal within walls that constantly reminded us of what we had lost. Let's do it, I decided. We'll find somewhere new that fits who we are now. That conversation catalyzed a cascade of changes that extended far beyond simply changing our address. It prompted a fundamental reassessment of every aspect of our lives: what to keep, what to release, what to transform. We began with the house itself, working with a realtor to prepare it for sale while simultaneously exploring neighborhoods closer to Olivia's rehabilitation center. The process of decluttering and staging our home became unexpectedly therapeutic, allowing us to make intentional decisions about the physical objects that had accumulated around us over years of family life. Some items were easy to categorize. Treasured photographs, meaningful artwork, and handcrafted gifts remained essential. Others prompted more reflection. Ethan's room, preserved largely unchanged since his death, required particularly thoughtful consideration. After much discussion, Olivia and I decided to keep select meaningful items that celebrated his life rather than maintaining an untouched shrine to his absence. He wouldn't want his room to become a museum, Olivia observed as we carefully selected items to bring to our new home. He'd want his things to be used, to matter to someone. This insight inspired a new initiative for the foundation. Working with child life specialists at Memorial Regional, we developed the Ethan's Essentials program, which provided personalized comfort items to children undergoing extended hospital stays. Ethan's books found homes in the hospital's pediatric library. His gaming system was the first of many donated to create a teen recreation room. His extensive collection of science kits became the foundation for a mobile learning lab that visited children too ill to attend school. These actions transformed our grief from a static weight into something dynamic and generative. Rather than simply remembering Ethan, we were extending his influence, allowing his compassion and creativity to continue affecting the world. As we reimagined our physical space, I simultaneously undertook a professional reinvention. The skills reawakened during the foundation crisis had reminded me how much I valued intellectual challenge and purposeful work. After several deep conversations with Rachel about the future of our once shared practice, I made a decision that surprised many but felt intuitively right. Instead of returning to family law, I accepted a position as general counsel for the hospital's nonprofit foundation, combining my legal expertise with my intimate understanding of healthcare philanthropy. The role allowed me to ensure proper governance of charitable organizations similar to the one James had exploited, while maintaining flexibility for Olivia's ongoing medical needs and rehabilitation. "You're creating something new from what broke you," Helena observed when I shared my decision. "That's the most powerful form of healing." Her words resonated deeply. Without minimizing the pain of everything we had endured, Ethan's illness and death, James's betrayal, Olivia's accident, I was beginning to recognize how these shattering experiences had created space for new growth that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. This perspective extended to the foundation itself. Rather than allowing James's misconduct to diminish its impact, we used the crisis as an opportunity for meaningful evolution. Under new leadership, the foundation expanded its mission beyond financial support for families facing pediatric illness. Drawing from our own experiences, we developed programs addressing the often overlooked emotional and practical challenges these families faced. The Sibling Support Initiative created specialized resources for brothers and sisters of seriously ill children, acknowledging the unique challenges they faced, something Olivia had navigated with remarkable grace during Ethan's illness. The Parents Partnership Program connected newly diagnosed families with others further along in their journey, providing peer support that complemented professional services. The Transition Assistance Fund helped families managing the complex aftermath of either recovery or loss. These expansions transformed the foundation from a primarily financial resource into a comprehensive support ecosystem. Donors responded enthusiastically to this evolution, with contributions actually increasing, following transparent disclosure of the governance crisis and the corrective measures implemented. Throughout this period of reconstruction, I maintained meticulous boundaries with James. Our communication occurred exclusively through attorneys, focused solely on finalizing divorce proceedings and ensuring his continued compliance with restitution requirements. The foundation's new governance structure eliminated any need for direct interaction regarding those matters, creating clean separation between our personal history and the organization's future. James himself seemed to recognize the wisdom of maintaining distance. The aggressive defiance I had anticipated never materialized. Instead, he fulfilled his financial obligations quietly and retreated from spaces where we might intersect. Whether this represented genuine remorse or simply pragmatic damage control remained unclear. In truth, understanding his motivations no longer held importance for me. My energy was directed toward building our new life rather than deciphering the ruins of the old one. 3 months after the board meeting, Olivia and I moved into our new home, a sunlight-filled apartment overlooking a community garden, modest in size but thoughtfully designed for her continuing mobility needs. The space represented our conscious choices rather than accumulated history. Walls adorned with art created by pediatric patients supported by the foundation. Bookshelves holding carefully selected volumes that honored the past without being consumed by it. Simple furnishings chosen for comfort rather than status. "It feels like us," Olivia declared as we shared dinner on our small balcony the first evening. "Not who we were trying to be before, but who we actually are." Her observation captured exactly what we had achieved, authenticity rising from the ashes of pretense. The carefully maintained facade of perfect family that James had exploited had been replaced by something more honest, more resilient, precisely because it acknowledged both our wounds and our power. This hard-won wisdom extended beyond our immediate circumstances, influencing how we engaged with the wider world. When a foundation donor experienced a public scandal, we responded with ethical clarity rather than fear of association. When hospital politics threatened to compromise patient care, I advocated from principle rather than political calculation. When Olivia faced challenges in her rehabilitation, we acknowledged difficulties honestly, rather than maintaining false positivity. 6 months after James's betrayal had been revealed, I received an unexpected call from William Torres, the hospital board chair who had presided over that pivotal meeting. "I hoped we might have coffee," he suggested. "There's an opportunity I'd like to discuss with you." We met at a small cafe near the hospital, where William explained that he was approaching retirement and leading the search for his successor as board chair. "The committee is unanimously recommending you for the position," he stated directly. "Your handling of the foundation crisis demonstrated exactly the qualities needed: ethical clarity, strategic thinking, and unwavering commitment to our mission of patient care." The offer stunned me. "I've only been on the board 3 years," I pointed out. "There are members with decades of service." "Length of service isn't the primary consideration," William replied. "The board needs leadership that can navigate complexity with integrity. You transformed a potentially devastating situation into an opportunity for meaningful improvement. That's precisely the perspective needed as healthcare faces increasing ethical and financial challenges." As I considered his words, I realized how profoundly my self-perception had evolved. 6 months earlier, I had seen myself primarily as a victim of circumstances: grieving mother, betrayed wife, advocate struggling to maintain a foundation. Now, others recognized what I was only beginning to acknowledge. These experiences had forged leadership capabilities of unusual depth and resilience. "I'm honored by the confidence," I told William, "but I'd need to ensure the role wouldn't compromise my commitments to Olivia and the foundation." "We would structure the position accordingly," he assured me. "Your perspective as both a parent of patients and a foundation leader strengthens what you bring to the role. Those aren't conflicts, but crucial qualifications." That evening, I shared the unexpected offer with Olivia during our daily rehabilitation walk, a ritual that had evolved from medical necessity into valuable connection time. "You should accept," she said without hesitation, navigating carefully with her still healing leg. "You're good at fixing broken systems." "It would mean more responsibility, more visibility," I cautioned. She considered this briefly before responding with characteristic directness. "Mom, everything that happened, with Ethan, with Dad, with my accident, none of it broke you. It revealed you. Why hide that?" Her perspective struck me with unexpected force. For years, I had viewed our family tragedies as diminishing events, each one taking something irreplaceable, leaving us less complete. Olivia saw something entirely different, a process of revelation rather than reduction, uncovering essential strength that had always existed beneath comfortable pretenses. 2 days later, I accepted the board chair position, with specific accommodations ensuring I could maintain my commitments to both Olivia's recovery and the foundation's continued development. The announcement was met with overwhelming support from the medical community, many of whom had witnessed the integrity with which I had handled the foundation crisis. As I stepped into this new role, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 6 months. What had begun with devastating betrayal had catalyzed a comprehensive reconstruction, not just of circumstances, but of identity itself. The painful dismantling of what I had believed about my marriage, my family, and my place in the world had created space for something more authentic to emerge. This wasn't the life I had planned or expected. It contained profound losses that would never be fully resolved. But it also offered possibilities I couldn't have imagined during those years of maintaining appearances and accommodating James's increasingly self-serving priorities. "We don't just rebuild after crisis," I shared during my first address as board chair. "We reimagine. We don't simply recover what was lost. We discover what might be possible when we're finally free to create from truth rather than expectation. The journey from that hospital room where I first discovered James's betrayal to the leadership position I now occupied wasn't a story of overnight transformation. It represented thousands of small choices to face reality honestly, to prioritize purpose over pretense, to build from authenticity rather than appearance. Each decision had contributed to the reconstruction of not just circumstances, but self, revealing capabilities and courage that had remained dormant during years of compromise. Have you experienced how crisis sometimes reveals strengths you never knew you possessed? Share your story of transformation in the comments below, and subscribe to hear the conclusion of our journey, including Olivia's remarkable recovery and the unexpected developments that proved this challenge was actually the beginning of our most meaningful chapter. 1 year after the revelation of James's betrayal, I stood at the podium during the Ethan Richardson Memorial Foundation's annual benefit gala. The event, held in Memorial Regional's newly renovated atrium, had drawn record attendance. Donors, healthcare professionals, families we had supported, and community leaders all gathered to celebrate the foundation's remarkable evolution. A year ago, I began, looking out at the assembled crowd. This foundation faced an existential crisis. Today we stand stronger than ever, having expanded our programs to support twice as many families while implementing governance standards that have become a model for healthcare philanthropy nationwide. The journey to this moment had been neither simple nor straightforward. The foundation's transformation had required not just rebuilding broken systems, but reimagining our entire approach to fulfilling Ethan's legacy. What had begun as a primarily financial support mechanism had evolved into a comprehensive ecosystem addressing the multidimensional challenges families faced during pediatric medical crises. Our success stems from a fundamental shift in perspective, I continued. Rather than seeing ourselves merely as providers of assistance, we've become architects of resilience, creating structures that help families not just survive medical crises, but emerge from them with newfound strength and purpose. As I spoke, my gaze fell on Olivia, seated at the front table with Helena and several teenage patients from our new peer support program. At 17, my daughter had transformed her own recovery journey into a platform for helping others. The support group she had founded for siblings of critically ill children now operated in 3 hospitals across the state, with plans for further expansion. Her physical recovery had progressed remarkably, though she would always carry certain limitations from her injuries. More striking was her emotional and spiritual growth, the authentic confidence that had replaced her former carefully maintained teenage facade. Like me, she had discovered that rebuilding after devastation offered unexpected opportunities for genuine self-creation. Tonight, I'm pleased to announce our most ambitious initiative yet, I revealed to the attentive audience. The Resilience Center, a dedicated facility adjacent to Memorial Regional, where families can access comprehensive support services during extended treatment periods. This center will provide temporary housing, educational support, mental health services, financial counseling, and community connection, all under one roof, addressing the holistic needs we've identified through years of working alongside families in crisis. The announcement generated enthusiastic applause, particularly from those who understood the profound gap this center would fill in the healthcare landscape. For families facing extended pediatric hospitalizations, practical challenges often compounded medical stress, housing insecurity, interrupted education, employment complications, and isolation from support networks. The Resilience Center represented our commitment to addressing these interrelated challenges holistically. This $12 million project represents the most significant expansion in our foundation's history, I acknowledged. I'm deeply grateful to announce that we've already secured $8 million through leadership gifts from committed donors who recognize the transformative potential of this approach. What I didn't share publicly was the unexpected source of the project's lead gift. 3 weeks earlier, I had received a call from an unfamiliar number while reviewing architectural proposals for the center. Rebecca Richardson, this is Margaret Whitman. The name had taken a moment to register. Margaret Whitman, one of the country's most prominent philanthropists, whose foundation focused primarily on educational initiatives rather than healthcare. We had never met, and to my knowledge, she had no connection to Memorial Regional or pediatric medicine. "I've been following your foundation's evolution with interest," she continued briskly, "particularly how you transformed a governance crisis into an opportunity for meaningful innovation. I'd like to discuss the possibility of supporting your work." Our subsequent meeting had revealed something unexpected. Margaret's grandson had received treatment at Memorial Regional 10 years earlier, during Ethan's first admission. Though our paths hadn't crossed directly, she had observed how the hospital struggled to support families beyond medical care. "When crisis struck your foundation, I watched carefully to see how you would respond," she explained during our private conversation. "Most organizations in similar situations focus primarily on damage control and returning to previous operations. You chose instead to fundamentally rethink your approach based on deeper understanding of family needs. That's exactly the kind of leadership philanthropy requires." Her $5 million lead gift had transformed the Resilience Center from aspiration to imminent reality, accelerating our timeline by nearly 2 years. More significant than the financial support was the validation from someone with her experience and discernment, recognition that our approach represented genuine innovation in family-centered care. As the gala continued, I circulated among attendees, connecting donors with families whose stories embodied our mission. The event exemplified how thoroughly we had reconstructed the foundation's approach, shifting from traditional fundraising, focused on donor recognition, to relationship building centered on meaningful connection to our work. Near the evening's conclusion, Michael Dawson, the hospital's financial director who had first alerted me to James's unauthorized transactions, approached with news that would significantly impact our path forward. The Richardson Medical Technologies acquisition was finalized this morning, he informed me quietly. Meridian Healthcare Systems completed the purchase for significantly less than market value, given the company's reputation challenges. This development represented the final chapter in James's professional downfall. Following the exposure of his foundation misappropriation and the subsequent termination of Memorial Regional's contracts, Richardson Medical had faced cascading consequences. Other hospital systems had launched their own reviews, many identifying similar pricing irregularities and conflicts of interest. Class action lawsuits from shareholders had followed. The acquisition by Meridian, at roughly 30% of the company's previous valuation, marked the definitive end of James's medical technology empire. "There's something else you should know," Michael continued. "Caroline Matthews was excluded from the transition team. According to my contacts at Meridian, she's been terminated effective immediately." Caroline, James's former marketing director and affair partner, had remained with Richardson Medical after James stepped down as CEO, reportedly leveraging compromising information to secure a senior vice president position during the company's turmoil. Her ouster represented another connection severed to that chapter of betrayal. "Thank you for letting me know," I replied, surprised by my own emotional neutrality regarding news that might once have triggered intense feelings. The professional and personal collapse of those who had betrayed my family no longer held power over my well-being or priorities. Later that evening, as the event concluded successfully, Helena joined me for a quiet moment before departing. "I've been meaning to ask," she began hesitantly. "Have you heard from James recently?" "Not directly," I answered truthfully. "The divorce was finalized 3 months ago. His final restitution payment to the foundation was processed last week. Our attorneys handle any necessary communication." Helena nodded thoughtfully. "I heard he's moving to Phoenix, starting some kind of consulting practice." The information prompted only mild curiosity rather than the emotional turbulence such news might have caused months earlier. James's whereabouts and activities had become increasingly irrelevant to the life Olivia and I had constructed. Data points about a past chapter rather than factors influencing our present or future. "I hope he finds whatever he's looking for," I said simply, and meant it. The energy once consumed by anger and betrayal had been redirected toward creation and purpose, leaving little room for sustained resentment. Returning home that evening, Olivia and I celebrated the gala's success with our private ritual, ice cream on our apartment balcony, regardless of weather or hour. The small celebration had begun during her early recovery and evolved into a cherished tradition marking milestones both significant and modest. Dr. Chen asked if I'd consider applying to the hospital's summer internship program, Olivia mentioned, as we enjoyed our dessert. He thinks my experience with the sibling support group would be valuable in the pediatric psychology department. "That's a wonderful opportunity," I responded, noting how naturally she had developed her own connections within the medical community, independent of my position. "Are you interested?" She considered thoughtfully. "I think so. I've been wondering if psychology might be my path. Not just because of everything we've been through, but because I've seen how much difference the right support at the right time can make." Her reflection illustrated how profoundly our experiences had shaped her perspective without defining her identity, informing her understanding without limiting her possibilities. The wisdom she had developed through adversity had become a foundation for growth rather than a weight restricting it. 2 days after the gala, I received an unexpected email that would open yet another unexpected chapter in our journey of reconstruction. The message came from Dr. Elise Montgomery, director of a prestigious research institute specializing in pediatric resilience, the psychological and social factors that help children navigate serious illness and family crisis. "Your foundation's evolution has captured our attention," she wrote, "particularly your innovative integration of emotional support with practical assistance. We've received funding to develop national models for comprehensive family support during pediatric medical crises, and we would like to explore a potential partnership with the Ethan Richardson Memorial Foundation." The proposal outlined a 3-year research collaboration that would document and evaluate our approaches, potentially creating scalable models that could be implemented in healthcare systems nationwide. This represented an opportunity to extend Ethan's legacy far beyond what we could accomplish individually, transforming our hard-won insights into resources that could benefit families across the country. As I reviewed the details with our foundation team, a profound realization emerged. The very crisis that had threatened to destroy our organization had instead positioned us to create impact beyond anything we had previously imagined. Without the complete rebuilding necessitated by James's betrayal, we likely would have continued our previous approaches indefinitely, helping families but never questioning whether more transformative models were possible. The reconstruction forced by betrayal had created space for innovation that comfortable circumstances might never have permitted. The painful dismantling of what we believed to be stable and secure had revealed possibilities that otherwise would have remained undiscovered. This perspective transformed how I viewed not just the Foundation's journey but my personal path as well. The devastating experiences of the past 4 years, Ethan's illness and death, James's betrayal, Olivia's accident, had stripped away layers of identity and expectation, creating space for authentic purpose to emerge. What initially appeared as serial tragedies had ultimately revealed themselves as a connected journey toward meaning and impact I couldn't have designed through intentional planning. During our next Foundation Board meeting, we unanimously approved the research partnership, establishing a collaborative framework that respected our practical experience while benefiting from the Institute's research expertise. The project would document our existing programs while systematically evaluating their effectiveness, creating evidence-based models that could be adapted by healthcare organizations nationwide. This partnership represents the next evolution of Ethan's legacy, I explained to our board members. Moving from direct service to systemic change, from helping dozens of families to potentially transforming support systems for thousands. The following weekend, Olivia and I visited Ethan's memorial garden at Memorial Regional, a quiet space we had helped design where families could find respite from the hospital's clinical environment. As we sat together on a bench inscribed with his name, watching butterflies navigate the carefully tended flowers, Olivia broke our contemplative silence. "Do you think Ethan would be proud of what we've built?" she asked, the question holding layers of meaning beyond its simple wording. I considered carefully before answering. I think he would recognize it as authentic to who he was. Someone who found ways to connect with others even in the hardest circumstances, who never stopped finding joy despite pain, who made every room he entered a little brighter. The foundation reflects those qualities not because we've tried to imagine what he would want, but because those values shaped us while loving him. Olivia nodded, satisfied with this perspective. It's strange to think that without all the awful things, without losing him, without Dad's betrayal, without my accident, none of this would exist. The foundation wouldn't be helping all these families. You wouldn't be leading the hospital. Board. I wouldn't have started the sibling program. Her observation captured precisely the paradox at the heart of our journey. How irreplaceable loss had catalyzed unimagined creation. How betrayal had precipitated authentic reconstruction. How endings had ultimately revealed beginnings. The terrible things that happen to us don't have inherent meaning, I reflected. We create meaning from them through how we respond. That's what resilience really is, not bouncing back to who we were before, but growing into something new that incorporates both our wounds and our wisdom. As we left the garden that day, I realized how profoundly my understanding of strength had evolved. True resilience wasn't about emotional invulnerability or returning to previous states. It was about integration, incorporation, and transformation. It meant building something meaningful not despite our broken places, but through them, allowing our wounds to become windows through which new possibilities could be recognized. The journey we had traveled, from that hospital room where I first discovered James's betrayal to the expanding impact we now created through the foundation, wasn't a story of overcoming adversity in the conventional sense. It was about allowing adversity to reveal what needed to be dismantled so that something more authentic could be constructed in its place. The path forward remained neither straight nor predictable. The Resilience Center would face construction challenges and implementation complexities. The research partnership would reveal both confirmations and contradictions of our approaches. Olivia would continue navigating the physical and emotional aftermath of her injuries. I would face new tests in balancing leadership responsibilities with personal well-being. Yet these challenges no longer appeared as threats to stability, but rather as invitations to continued evolution, opportunities to create meaning from circumstances rather than simply responding to them. The capacity to transform betrayal into purpose, crisis into creation, and loss into legacy represented a form of power that external circumstances could neither grant nor remove. Have you discovered unexpected gifts hidden within your most challenging experiences? Share your story of transformation in the comments below. And subscribe to hear the final chapter of our journey, including the surprising encounter that brought our story full circle and confirmed that our greatest challenges often reveal our most meaningful opportunities. 18 months after the Foundation Gala that had announced the Resilience Center, I stood at the edge of the construction site watching as workers installed the distinctive glass dome that would crown the building. The structure had taken shape, remarkably quickly once permits were secured, transforming what had been an underutilized parking area into a welcoming space designed specifically for families navigating medical crises. The center's architecture itself embodied our philosophy: open and transparent, yet providing necessary privacy, connected to the hospital while maintaining a distinct, non-clinical atmosphere. accessible to all while offering personalized spaces for individual needs. Every element had been thoughtfully considered, from the natural lighting that reduced institutional feel to the flexible gathering spaces that could accommodate various support programs. "It's really happening," Olivia observed, joining me at the observation point. Now 18 and preparing for college, she had become an integral part of the center's development, serving on the youth advisory board that ensured the facility would address the specific needs of siblings and young patients. "It's even better than I imagined," I agreed, watching as the final section of the dome was carefully lowered into place. The moment felt profoundly symbolic, the completion of a protective structure that would shelter families during their most vulnerable times, just as our reconstructed lives had created space for healing and growth after betrayal. The Resilience Center represented the culmination of our foundation's evolution, incorporating everything we had learned through both professional observation and personal experience. The facility would house temporary family accommodations, educational support services, financial counseling resources, mental health professionals, legal advisors, and community connection programs, addressing the comprehensive needs that emerged during extended medical crises. Funding for the center had ultimately exceeded our initial $12 million goal, reaching nearly $15 million as our vision resonated with donors across the healthcare landscape. Margaret Whitman's lead gift had attracted additional major contributors, including several hospital systems interested in eventually replicating our model. The research partnership with Dr. Montgomery's Institute had further elevated the project's significance, positioning it as a potential national prototype for integrated family support. As we observed the construction milestone, Dr. Helena Martinez approached, datapad in hand, to share news regarding our first scheduled residents. "The Stevens family is confirmed for opening week," she reported. 7-year-old with leukemia, parents both working, plus 2 teenage siblings. Exactly the type of situation the center was designed for. The Stevens family exemplified the scenarios that had inspired the center's creation. Working parents, navigating the impossible balancing act of maintaining employment, supporting a critically ill child, and attending to siblings whose lives were also disrupted by medical crisis. Until now, such families cobbled together temporary solutions, often at tremendous personal and financial cost. The Resilience Center would provide integrated support that acknowledged the interconnected challenges they faced. Later that afternoon, I met with the research team documenting the center's development and implementation. Dr. Montgomery's Institute had embedded several researchers within our organization, systematically recording decisions, adaptations, and lessons learned throughout the process. This rigorous documentation would enable other communities to potentially replicate our model without repeating our learning curve. The medical establishment tends to focus exclusively on treating the patient, Dr. Montgomery observed as we reviewed preliminary findings. "What your foundation has accomplished is creating empirical evidence for what families have always known intuitively, that successful treatment requires addressing the ecosystem surrounding the patient, not just the medical condition itself." Her validation reinforced what we had discovered through our own experiences. Medical outcomes improved when families received comprehensive support that reduced external stressors and enabled them to focus on their child's healing. What had begun as our intuitive response to observed needs was now developing into evidence-based practice that could transform pediatric care approaches nationwide. That evening, as I prepared for a presentation to hospital leadership regarding the center's imminent opening, I received an unexpected message from Janet Simmons, the foundation's dedicated accountant who had helped uncover James's financial misappropriation. "I've just received something unusual that you should see," her message read. "A wire transfer from Phoenix for $2, $5 million designated specifically for the Resilience Center. The donor is listed as J.R. Consultants with a note requesting anonymity. J.R. Consultants, James Richardson." After nearly 2 years of no direct contact beyond legal necessities, this substantial anonymous donation represented an unforeseen development. The amount far exceeded his court-mandated restitution, which had been completed months earlier. This was entirely voluntary and specifically directed toward our most ambitious initiative. I sat with this information, allowing my initial reactions to surface and dissipate before determining how to respond. The immediate impulse to reject, the funds gradually gave way to more nuanced consideration. The donation represented approximately 3 times what James had misappropriated from the foundation. It arrived without conditions, recognition requests, or attempts at personal contact. Most significantly, it was directed toward a project that would directly benefit families facing circumstances similar to what our own family had experienced during Ethan's illness. After thoughtful reflection, I called Janet back. "Accept the donation," I instructed. "Maintain the anonymity as requested, but ensure all proper documentation for tax and legal purposes." This decision wasn't about forgiveness or reconciliation, but about pragmatic purpose. $2. $5 million would significantly enhance the center's programming capabilities, directly benefiting the families we existed to serve. The following week brought another unexpected communication, this one from Caroline Matthews, James's former marketing director and affair partner. Her email arrived with a subject line that immediately captured my attention. Important information. Regarding Foundation families. Opening it cautiously, I discovered something entirely unexpected. Caroline had apparently established a small nonprofit in Phoenix providing employment assistance to parents of chronically ill children, helping them find flexible work arrangements that accommodated unpredictable medical schedules. Her organization had developed relationships with several companies willing to create accommodating positions, and she was offering to extend these connections to families served by our foundation. "I understand if you want nothing to do with me or any initiative I'm involved with," her message acknowledged directly. "I've spent 2 years reflecting on the harm my choices caused to your family and the Foundation's mission. I can't undo that damage, but I can perhaps offer something that might genuinely help the families you serve." The offer contained no requests for recognition, partnership, or personal reconciliation, just practical resources that aligned with needs we had identified among Foundation families. After conferring with our program directors about the legitimacy of the employment connections, I authorized a limited collaboration focused exclusively on connecting interested families with these opportunities. These unexpected developments from the 2 people who had betrayed my family most profoundly prompted deeper reflection on the nature of restoration and redemption. Their actions didn't erase the past or repair the personal damage they had caused, but they suggested something significant about the ripple effects of both destructive and constructive choices. Our Foundation's transformation following James's betrayal had apparently catalyzed changes beyond our immediate sphere, inspiring reconsideration, restitution, and redirection, even among those who had caused the initial harm. As the Resilience Center's opening day approached, these threads of connection and consequence continued weaving themselves into the fabric of our evolving story. The research partnership expanded to include 3 additional healthcare systems interested in implementing similar models. Olivia's sibling support program received grant funding to develop standardized resources that could be adapted for hospitals nationwide. The Foundation's board approved a strategic plan for gradually expanding our direct service footprint beyond Memorial Regional to 5 additional hospitals within the state. Throughout this period of expansion, I maintained careful balance between professional leadership and personal well-being, a lesson hard learned through earlier experiences. Regular therapy sessions provided space to process ongoing feelings about James's betrayal and its continuing reverberations. Monthly retreats with Helena and a small circle of trusted friends ensured I maintained perspective beyond organizational demands. Most importantly, protected time with Olivia remained sacrosanct, particularly as she prepared for her transition to college. 2 days before the Resilience Center's official opening ceremony, Olivia and I visited the completed facility for a private tour. Walking through the thoughtfully designed spaces, the comfortable family apartments, the education center where siblings could maintain academic progress, the consultation rooms where professionals would provide integrated support services. We witnessed the physical manifestation of everything we had envisioned. It's like every difficult thing we experienced has been transformed into its opposite, Olivia observed as we stood in the central atrium, sunlight streaming through the glass dome above. All the support that was scattered or missing when Ethan was sick. All the challenges we faced when Dad left during my hospitalization. They've been turned into solutions for other families. Her insight captured precisely what we had accomplished, transmuting personal tragedy into practical support, converting betrayal into a catalyst for innovation, transforming what had broken us into something that would strengthen others. The Resilience Center represented not just institutional evolution, but alchemical transformation, the conversion of our most painful experiences into their healing counterparts. As we completed our tour, the center's newly hired director approached, with news that created one final unexpected connection in our journey. "I wanted to let you know about our first emergency placement," she explained. "We've had a request from Children's Hospital across town. A family suddenly needed accommodation after their child was transferred here for specialized treatment. The father is apparently a former physician who lost his medical license following substance abuse issues. The mother is struggling with mounting bills while caring for their son. They have nowhere else to go." The situation she described triggered immediate recognition, a family disintegrating under the pressure of pediatric illness, just as James and I might have if Ethan's condition had continued deteriorating. A father whose professional identity had collapsed, like James's had following the exposure of his misconduct. A mother fighting to hold everything together while watching her child suffer, as I had done during Ethan's treatment. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.